The night was unusually quiet, the kind of stillness that made the air feel heavy with anticipation. The stars above shimmered faintly, their light dimmed by the thick haze of Earth's atmosphere. In a small, unassuming house on the outskirts of a sleepy town, a man sat alone in his living room. He stared blankly at the wall, his mind adrift in memories he had tried so hard to bury. Memories of a place far beyond this world, of beings unlike anything humanity could fathom, and of a bond he never thought possible. It had been years since he returned to Earth, years since he left behind everything, and everyone, he had grown to care for. His heart ached with an emptiness he couldn't quite explain, as though a piece of him remained tethered to that distant planet. He often wondered if it was all real or just some elaborate dream conjured by his subconscious. But deep down, he knew better. The scars on his hands, the faint hum in his ears when silence fell too long, and the inexplicable pull toward the stars were proof enough. They were reminders of her, the alien queen. Her voice echoed in his mind now, soft yet commanding, filled with a warmth that defied her regal title. She had been both protector and captor, ruler and confidant. Her iridescent skin shimmered like liquid starlight, and her eyes held galaxies within them. When she spoke, it wasn't merely words. It was an entire symphony of emotion wrapped in tones no human language could replicate. And yet, somehow, he understood every nuance, every whispered promise. She had called him her chosen one, a phrase that felt absurd coming from such a powerful being. At first, he resisted, fought against the idea of being taken away from his home, his life. But over time, resistance gave way to curiosity, then admiration, and finally something deeper, something he dared not name. It wasn't love, not in the traditional sense. It was more primal, more profound. A connection forged not through words but through shared experiences, through moments that transcended species and worlds. And now, sitting in the dim glow of his solitary lamp, he felt her presence again. Not physically, but in the way the air seemed to shift around him, charged with an energy that prickled his skin. His pulse quickened, and his breath caught in his throat. Could it be? Was she here? Or was this another trick of his mind, playing cruel games with his longing? Before he could dwell further, the window across the room shattered inward with a deafening crash. Glass shards scattered across the floor, glinting like diamonds under the moonlight. Standing amidst the debris was a figure cloaked in shadow, its silhouette otherworldly and unmistakable. As the dust settled, the figure stepped forward into the light, revealing herself fully. It was her, the alien queen. Her form was even more breathtaking than he remembered, her ethereal beauty magnified by the intensity of her gaze. She moved with grace, each step deliberate, as though the very ground beneath her feet recognized her authority. Her elongated limbs carried an elegance that was almost hypnotic, and her shimmering exoskeleton reflected the faint glow of the room's single light source, casting prismatic hues across the walls. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Time itself seemed to pause, suspended between disbelief and inevitability. Then, slowly, she raised one delicate hand, extending it toward him. Her fingers were tipped with subtle claws, curved delicately like crescent moons. Her touch wasn't threatening, it radiated warmth, familiarity. And in that gesture lay 1,000 unspoken words, a plea that needed no translation. "I missed you," she said finally, her voice resonating in a way that vibrated through his very core. It wasn't English, nor any language he knew, but he understood perfectly. "So much. Let's go back." His chest tightened, torn between the life he had built here and the life he had left behind. Here, there was safety, routine, solitude. Back there was her. There was purpose, meaning, belonging. But how could he leave again? How could he abandon everything he had worked so hard to reclaim? Her expression softened, perhaps sensing his turmoil. She took another step closer, closing the distance between them until they stood face to face. Her scent enveloped him, a mixture of metallic tang and something sweet, floral yet alien. It stirred memories he thought he had locked away. The vast crystalline forests, the bioluminescent skies, the hum of creatures that sang in frequencies only she could hear. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, betraying vulnerability he hadn't expected. "You are my equal, my counterpart. Without you, I am incomplete." Her admission struck him like a thunderclap. Equal. Counterpart. These were titles reserved for beings of immense power, yet she bestowed them upon him without hesitation. He wanted to argue, to tell her he was nothing special, just a man who happened to stumble into her orbit. But looking into her eyes, he saw the truth etched there. To her, he was extraordinary. To her, he mattered. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, he reached up hesitantly, his hand hovering inches from hers. For a fleeting second, doubt clouded his mind. What would happen if he went back? Would he lose himself entirely, swallowed whole by her world? Or worse, would he find himself unable to adapt once more to the simplicity of human existence? But then she closed the gap herself, her cool fingers brushing against his palm. The contact sent a jolt through him, electric and undeniable. It was as though the universe itself conspired to bring them together, erasing doubts and fears with a single touch. "We must hurry," she urged, her tone urgent now. "The portal will not remain open for long." Portal. He hadn't considered how she had arrived, or how they would leave. Yet, instinctively, he trusted her. Trust wasn't logical, not in this situation. But logic had abandoned him the moment she reappeared in his life. With a nod, he allowed her to guide him toward the broken window. Outside, the night was alive with strange lights, shifting colors that danced across the sky like auroras untethered from poles. They pulsed rhythmically, synchronized with the beat of his racing heart. Beyond them loomed a massive structure, shimmering and translucent, pulsating with energy. It hovered silently above the trees, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. As they approached, he realized the enormity of what he was about to do. This wasn't just leaving his home, it was stepping into the unknown once more, surrendering to forces beyond comprehension. But as he glanced back at the house, one last look before moving forward, he found no regret. Only resolve. Side by side, they walked toward the portal, her presence steady beside him. With each step, the pull grew stronger, drawing him inexorably toward the luminous gateway. The air crackled with anticipation, charged with the promise of reunion and renewal. And as they crossed the threshold together, leaving Earth behind, he felt a strange sense of peace wash over him. They emerged into chaos. The alien world stretched before them, a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds that assaulted his senses. Towering crystalline structures pierced the sky, their surfaces refracting light into dazzling patterns. Creatures unlike anything he'd ever seen scurried across the terrain, some glowing softly, others emitting low-pitched hums that reverberated through the ground beneath his feet. The air smelled metallic yet sweet, carrying undertones of something floral and unfamiliar. Every breath felt electric, invigorating, suffused with the raw vitality of a planet teeming with life. Yet chaos wasn't confined to the environment. Around them, the Queen's subjects swarmed, their movements frantic and disjointed. Their sleek insectoid forms gleamed under the dual suns, which hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows that danced unnaturally. Some bore weapons, others tools, but all seemed driven by a singular urgency. They chattered in rapid bursts of clicks and chirps, their communication unintelligible to him but clearly fraught with tension. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the din. She didn't answer immediately, her focus trained on the horizon where a dark cloud loomed. It wasn't a storm, not in the earthly sense, but rather a swirling mass of black tendrils that writhed like living things. The sight of it sent a shiver down his spine, a visceral reaction he couldn't suppress. Whatever it was, it radiated menace, a palpable wrongness that unsettled even the most resilient parts of him. "The veil approaches," she said at last, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "We have little time." "The veil," he repeated, turning to her. Her expression was grim, her usually radiant features shadowed by worry. He had never seen her like this, vulnerable, almost fragile. It frightened him more than the encroaching darkness. "It is a void," she explained, gesturing toward the ominous mass. "A force that consumes all it touches. Worlds, civilizations, life itself, it devours without discrimination. My people have fought it for millennia, holding it at bay through ancient rituals and sacrifices. But now," she trailed off, her gaze dropping briefly before snapping back to his. Now, we are failing. Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. He stared at her, trying to process the enormity of what she was saying. This wasn't just about their reunion or returning to her world. Something far greater was at stake, something that demanded his involvement whether he was ready or not. "And you need me," he said, the realization dawning on him. "That's why you came for me." She nodded, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that left no room for doubt. "Yes. You are the key to stopping it. Together, we can restore balance, seal the breach before it consumes us all." He felt a surge of panic rise in his chest. "Me? How could I possibly help? I'm just a human." "You underestimate yourself," she countered sharply, her tone brooking no argument. "You carry within you the essence of our bond, a connection forged across dimensions. That bond is the only thing capable of stabilizing the rift. Without you, we are lost." The weight of her declaration pressed down on him, crushing and exhilarating all at once. He wanted to protest, to insist she was mistaken, but deep down, he knew she wasn't. The same pull that drew him back to her now tugged at him again, urging him forward, compelling him to act. Before he could respond, a loud rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. The swarm of aliens around them scattered, retreating toward the towering spires that dominated the skyline. From the direction of the Vale came a series of guttural roars, low and menacing, growing louder with each passing second. Shadows detached themselves from the writhing mass, taking shape as grotesque, malformed creatures that slithered and crawled across the landscape. They were hideous, their bodies twisted amalgamations of organic matter and pure darkness, their eyes, where eyes should be, glowing with malevolent intent. "We must move," she commanded, grabbing his arm and pulling him along. Her grip was firm, unyielding, and he followed without question, his legs pumping furiously to keep up with her swift strides. They ran through the chaotic expanse, dodging panicked aliens and leaping over fissures that split the ground like jagged wounds. Behind them, the monstrous forms gained ground, their movements erratic but unervingly fast. One lunged suddenly, its clawed appendage narrowly missing his shoulder. He stumbled, nearly falling, but she yanked him upright with surprising strength. "Keep going," she shouted, her voice cutting through the cacophony of noise. "Do not falter." Ahead, the largest of the crystalline towers loomed closer, its base surrounded by a ring of glowing runes that pulsed erratically. The closer they got, the more the air seemed to vibrate, humming with an energy that set his teeth on edge. He could feel it now, the power emanating from the structure, ancient and immense. It called to him, whispering promises of salvation and destruction in equal measure. "This is the nexus," she explained as they reached the outer perimeter. "Here, the fabric of reality is thinnest. It is where we must perform the ritual to seal the veil." He looked at her, his heart pounding wildly. "What do I need to do?" Her gaze softened momentarily, though urgency still lingered in her eyes. "You must trust me completely. The bond we share will guide you. Focus on it, let it flow through you. Only then can we succeed." Nodding, he took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. The creatures were nearly upon them now, their grotesque forms blotting out the horizon. The alien queen raised her arms, her body glowing faintly as she began to chant in a language older than time itself. The runes responded, flaring brighter with each syllable, bathing the area in a blinding light. As the first wave of monsters crashed against the barrier formed by the runes, he stepped forward, placing himself at the center of the nexus. Closing his eyes, he reached out, not physically, but with something deeper, something intangible. And there it was, the bond she spoke of, a thread of golden energy that connected them across space and time. He grasped it tightly, letting it fill him, guide him. The ritual began. The nexus pulsed violently around him, its energy coursing through his veins like molten fire. Each heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of the alien queen's chant, their combined willpower weaving a tapestry of defiance against the encroaching darkness. The bond between them burned brighter, illuminating unseen pathways in his mind, unlocking fragments of knowledge that felt both foreign and familiar. He understood now, not intellectually, but instinctually, the intricate interplay of forces required to stabilize the rift. Yet, as the seconds ticked by, the strain became unbearable. His muscles screamed in protest, his vision blurred, and sweat poured down his face despite the frigid air. The veil reacted, recoiling momentarily before surging forward with renewed ferocity. Its tendrils lashed out, testing the boundaries of the protective barrier created by the runes. One tendril breached momentarily, snaking past the defenses and striking a nearby crystal spire. The impact shattered the structure, sending shards raining down like deadly hail. Panic rippled through the gathered aliens, their chittering cries rising in pitch as they scrambled to reinforce the perimeter. The Queen's voice wavered slightly, her composure cracking under the mounting pressure. She faltered, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. The golden thread binding them flickered, its brilliance dimming dangerously. "No!" he gasped, clutching at the fading connection. Desperation surged within him, overriding the pain and exhaustion. He focused harder, pouring every ounce of his being into reigniting the bond. Slowly, painstakingly, the thread steadied, its glow intensifying once more. But the effort came at a cost. His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. His chest heaved, each breath feeling shallower than the last. Through the haze of fatigue, he caught glimpses of the battle raging outside the nexus. The monstrous forms from the veil had multiplied, their numbers overwhelming. They swarmed relentlessly, battering the barriers with brute force and unnatural cunning. The runes continued to flare, but their light grew erratic, sputtering like dying embers. Cracks spread across the surface of the nexus itself, spiderwebbing outward with alarming speed. "We're losing," he croaked, his voice barely audible over the din. "It's too strong." The Queen turned to him, her expression a mixture of anguish and determination. "We cannot fail," she insisted, her voice trembling with emotion. "Not now. Not when we are so close." Her words ignited a spark within him, reigniting the stubborn resolve that had brought him this far. Summoning the last reserves of his strength, he forced himself to stand, leaning heavily on the staff-like protrusion of a nearby crystal formation for support. His legs quivered beneath him, threatening to give way, but he refused to fall. "Not again." "Tell me what to do," he rasped, meeting her gaze with unwavering intensity. "Whatever it takes." Her eyes widened slightly, surprise mingling with pride. Then, without hesitation, she extended her hand toward him, her fingers brushing against his forehead. A jolt of energy coursed through him, sharp and electrifying, flooding his senses with vivid images and sensations. He saw flashes of her world before the veil's corruption, pristine landscapes bathed in perpetual twilight, cities crafted from living organisms that pulsed with harmonious energy, her people thriving in symbiotic unity. He felt the depth of her love for her people, her unyielding devotion to protecting them at any cost. And then he saw something else, a vision of himself standing atop the nexus, arms outstretched, his body transformed into a conduit of pure light. The image was fleeting but seared into his consciousness, leaving no room for doubt about what needed to be done. "You must become the anchor," she whispered urgently. "Let the bond consume you, channel its power fully. Only then can we seal the breach permanently." Fear clawed at the edges of his mind, whispering warnings of annihilation, of losing himself entirely. But beneath the fear lay clarity, a profound understanding that this sacrifice was necessary. Not just for her, or for her people, but for something greater. Something universal. "I'm ready," he said firmly, straightening his posture despite the agony coursing through him. His voice rang out with conviction, cutting through the chaos like a blade. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes as she stepped back to allow him space. The chanting resumed, louder and more fervent than before, her voice blending seamlessly with the collective prayers of her people. The golden thread flared brilliantly, wrapping around him like a cocoon of radiant energy. He closed his eyes, surrendering completely to the torrent of power surging through him. Time lost meaning. Reality bent and warped, reshaping itself around him. He felt himself expanding, stretching beyond the confines of his mortal shell, becoming something vast and eternal. Pain dissolved into euphoria, fear into peace. For a brief, transcendent moment, he existed everywhere and nowhere, witnessing the infinite tapestry of creation unfolding before him. And then, with a deafening roar, the nexus erupted in a blinding explosion of light. The shockwave rippled outward, obliterating the encroaching darkness and scattering the monstrous forms like ash in the wind. The veil recoiled violently, its tendrils snapping back as though burned. Slowly, agonizingly, the rift began to seal, the edges knitting together with threads of golden energy. When the light finally faded, silence descended over the battlefield. The surviving aliens stared in awe at the now stable nexus, their expressions a mixture of relief and reverence. Among them stood the queen, her form trembling with exhaustion but illuminated by an indescribable joy. At the center of the nexus, however, lay a figure, humanoid yet altered, glowing faintly with residual energy. His chest rose and fell shallowly, a sign of life clinging tenuously to existence. The bond remained intact, though diminished, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Tears streamed down her face as she knelt beside him, cradling his head gently in her hands. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Thank you for everything." As the alien queen cradled his unconscious form, a tremor rippled through the nexus. The golden energy that had sealed the veil began to fluctuate, its steady rhythm faltering like a dying heartbeat. Her eyes widened in alarm as she turned her gaze upward, where faint cracks, imperceptible at first, were spreading across the crystalline structure of the nexus. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling with dread. "It's not over." The realization struck her like a physical blow. The ritual had succeeded in sealing the breach, but only temporarily. The veil, though weakened, still lingered beyond the horizon, its malevolent presence pulsing faintly like an open wound refusing to heal. Worse yet, the strain of channeling such immense power had destabilized the nexus itself. Without immediate intervention, the entire structure would collapse, undoing everything they had fought for. She looked down at him, her heart aching with guilt and desperation. He had given so much, too much, to save her world. His body was frail now, his life force depleted to sustain the bond that held the rift closed. To ask more of him felt cruel, unbearable. Yet there was no other option. Only he could stabilize the nexus permanently, anchoring it with the same connection that had bridged their two worlds. Summoning every ounce of resolve, she placed one hand on his chest and closed her eyes. A soft hum resonated between them as she reached out telepathically, probing the depths of his consciousness. She found him adrift in a sea of fragmented memories, caught between dreams of Earth and visions of her world. His mind was fragile, shattered by the overwhelming forces he had channeled. But beneath the chaos, the bond still burned, a flickering beacon of hope. "Forgive me," she murmured, tears streaming down her face as she strengthened the mental link. With gentle persuasion, she guided him back toward awareness, coaxing fragments of his identity into alignment. Each step was agonizingly slow, fraught with resistance from his subconscious, which sought refuge in oblivion rather than face further pain. But she persisted, unwilling to let go. When his eyelids finally fluttered open, confusion clouded his features. He blinked up at her, disoriented, before recognition dawned. "What happened?" he rasped, his voice hoarse. "The veil is contained," she explained quickly, her tone urgent. "But the nexus is failing. If we don't act soon, it will destroy itself and reopen the rift." He stared at her, comprehension dawning slowly. "You want me to do it again," he said flatly, his words laced with resignation. Her silence confirmed his fears. For a moment, anger flared within him, not directed at her, but at the universe itself for forcing this impossible burden upon him once more. He clenched his fists, his breathing shallow as he wrestled with despair. How could he endure another trial when his body felt hollow, his spirit drained? Before he could protest further, a sudden commotion erupted outside the nexus. Shouts and screeches filled the air as the surviving aliens scattered in panic. Turning his head weakly, he saw a new threat emerging from the remnants of the veil, a figure cloaked in shadow, humanoid yet grotesquely distorted. Its limbs stretched unnaturally long, ending in razor-sharp claws that gleamed ominously under the dim light. Eyes like molten gold glowed within its featureless face, radiating intelligence far beyond the mindless creatures they had faced earlier. "That's impossible," the queen breathed, horror etched into her features. "It shouldn't be able to take form here." The figure advanced steadily, its movements fluid and deliberate. Behind it trailed wisps of darkness, tendrils of the veil clinging to its form like a shroud. As it approached, the air grew colder, heavier, suffocating. The runes around the nexus sputtered and dimmed, their protective energy sapped by the entity's mere presence. It's using the instability of the nexus to manifest, she realized aloud, her voice tinged with panic. If it reaches us. She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both understood what was at stake. This wasn't just a remnant of the veil, it was something far worse, a harbinger, a fragment of the void given sentience. It sought not just destruction, but domination, feeding on fear and despair to grow stronger. With great effort, he pushed himself upright, leaning heavily against her for support. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Her expression hardened, determination replacing fear. "We fight." Before he could respond, she released him and stepped forward, raising her arms in defiance. A surge of energy erupted from her body, forming a shimmering barrier between them and the advancing entity. The creature paused, tilting its head as if assessing the obstacle. Then, with a guttural roar, it lunged forward, its claws slicing through the barrier like paper. The impact sent her sprawling backward, her strength visibly waning. She struggled to rise, but the effort left her gasping for breath. Seeing her vulnerability ignited a spark within him, a primal instinct to protect her, no matter the cost. Summoning every shred of courage, he stood tall, planting himself firmly between her and the creature. His hands trembled as he raised them, palms outward, as though willing some latent power to awaken within him. To his astonishment, a faint glow began to emanate from his fingertips, growing brighter with each passing second. The bond responded, reigniting despite his exhaustion, fueling him with a surge of energy that felt both alien and familiar. The creature hesitated, its golden eyes narrowing as it regarded him. For a fleeting moment, doubt flickered across its monstrous visage, a crack in its otherwise implacable facade. Sensing an opportunity, he focused all his willpower into the glowing light, shaping it into a concentrated beam that shot forth like a spear. The attack struck true, piercing the creature's chest and eliciting a deafening shriek. Black ichor spilled from the wound, sizzling as it hit the ground. But instead of collapsing, the entity staggered backward, its form shifting and contorting. Where the injury should have been fatal, tendrils of darkness coiled around the gash, knitting it shut with unnatural speed. "It's healing!" he exclaimed, panic rising in his chest. The queen joined him, her voice strained but resolute. "Its essence is tied to the veil. You can't kill it outright, you must sever its connection." "And how do I do that?" he demanded, glancing at her desperately. "You must use the nexus," she replied, her gaze locking onto his. "Channel your energy into it, amplify the bond until it becomes a weapon. Only then can you banish it." He nodded grimly, understanding the gravity of what she proposed. Drawing upon the last reserves of his strength, he turned toward the unstable structure behind them. Placing his hands on its surface, he poured every ounce of his being into the nexus, feeling the bond blaze to life with unprecedented intensity. The golden light engulfed him, spreading outward in waves that illuminated the battlefield. The creature recoiled, its form writhing as the light seared through its dark essence. Letting out an ear-splitting scream, it lunged forward one final time, aiming to strike him down before the process completed. Time seemed to slow as its claws descended, inches from tearing into his flesh. In that split second, the queen acted. With a cry of anguish, she threw herself in front of him, intercepting the blow meant for him. The impact sent her crashing to the ground, blood pooling beneath her as she collapsed. "No!" he screamed, his voice raw with grief and fury. The loss of her reignited the bond with explosive force, transforming the nexus into a blinding pillar of pure energy. The creature shrieked in agony as the light consumed it, dissolving its form into nothingness. When the brilliance faded, silence reigned once more. The nexus stabilized, its golden glow steady and serene. But the victory came at a devastating cost. Kneeling beside her motionless form, he cradled her in his arms, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," he choked out, clutching her tightly. "I failed you." Her eyes fluttered open weakly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "You saved us all," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Promise me you'll stay strong." And with those final words, her body went limp, her iridescent skin dimming to a dull gray. The weight of her absence crushed him, but the bond they shared still pulsed faintly in his chest, a quiet reminder of her sacrifice. Around him, the alien world began to heal, bathed in the soft glow of twin suns. Her people gathered silently, their sorrow palpable yet mingled with reverence for what he had done. Clutching her lifeless hand, he vowed to honor her memory by protecting the fragile peace she had given everything to secure. Slowly he rose, his legs unsteady but resolute, guided by the lingering echo of her voice. The nexus hummed steadily behind him, its light now a beacon of hope rather than despair. Though broken, he knew he could not leave. Not yet. This was his home now, as much as Earth ever was. With a final glance at her fallen form, he stepped forward, carrying her legacy in every heartbeat. And as the wind whispered through the crystalline spires, it seemed to carry her laughter, soft and eternal. The stars above shimmered brighter, as if watching over him, urging him onward.